Andrea Gallo. I would like to give an overview of the 96-board Enterprise Edition specification, covering also a little bit of the reference builds that we are putting together with the 96-board team and in cooperation with LEG. And we have also collected some feedback from the networking group and the home group about how they would see the adoption of the Enterprise Edition board in the LNG and LHG groups. I'll try and go quickly through the specifications so that we can have room for questions during the session or at the end. So this is the link to the specification where you can download the PDF. It's a public specification. The Enterprise Edition is intended to support a low-cost software development platform. That's for advanced ARM SoCs. That's targeting high-end embedded networking, server, community engineering activities, build farms, and of course also early SoC evaluation. We do seek the involvement of the engineering communities. We look at open source upstream development involving universities, but also real-life benchmarking, tuning, including power management. We also like the idea of seeing the board being used in automated test farms, build farms, and of course the 96-board program that is run by Linaro. There are two versions, two form factors of the specification. Standard form factor, a standard version that is 160 by 120 millimeters. That is the low cost, the small form factor that we envisage for standalone usage sitting on a desk of any engineer. And then there's the micro ATX version that is a bigger form factor that is designed to be also integrated in standard off-the-shelf ATX cases using a standard ATX pre-built chassis, power supply, and box. The target is for the standard version to be low cost, targeting between $199 and $399. And as for the 96-board consumer edition, the idea is that these boards shall be easily available through global distributors, Amazon, Alibaba, Farnell, DigiKey, and all the usual suspects. The main point, just like for the 96-board consumer edition, is that we want to enable a third-party ecosystem, an ecosystem of software developers, an ecosystem of hardware developers. We want to see and we want to foster the growth of an ecosystem of mezzanine boards, add-on boards that can be developed and plugged on the 96-board. The slides that I've put together are actually copy-pasted from the specification. So you can look at let's go quickly through these slides, but please refer to the specification for any further detail. You will see that the specification covers the minimum hardware features of a board, and every manufacturer can then add more. So the minimal features are important to have a common set of peripherals and a common software build that would run of all. First of all, the design is independent from the SoC point of view. We want to support any ARM SoC, 32-bit or 64-bit. Obviously, as we are targeting an Enterprise Edition, we do expect that the majority, if not all, would be 64-bit. On the memory side, the specification is mandating a minimum of 1 gigabyte. Now, to be practical, if we want to do enterprise work, if we want to run server workloads, you won't do much with 1 gigabyte. So 1 gigabyte is the minimum to reduce the cost, to have a kernel that is booting up. If you really want to do serious server software development, well, you should go for a 16 GB. And that would allow you to run virtual machines and hypervisors. As we have seen this morning, if you want to run big data and in-memory machine learning, well, then 32 GB would be a better choice. So depending on for a manufacturer, depending on the target market for the 96-board Enterprise Edition, it's a trade-off between the end price of your board and the use case that you want to target. There's also the option of actually selling the board with an SODIMM socket so that you can upgrade the memory as needed. And we can also think of the manufacturers to either pre-bundle the board with a given DIMM, maybe a low-cost 1 GB, just to have the board booting, and then let the customers replace and add their own memory when they need more memory. Here we have the minimum set of onboard connectors, expansion I/O. The specification is pretty detailed. Serial over USB, using a micro USB interface, 2 USB ports, RJ45 gigabit Ethernet. This is very important. It's one of the major differences compared to the consumer edition. The specification also goes into the details of which power supply to be used. And it's very important that the board shall support also the standard 96-boards low-speed expansion connector. And we will see more of this in a minute. Last but not least, there shall be standardized position for the PCIe Express if implemented. It's optional, but if you do implement it, there's a specific position on the board where the connector shall go. The specification provides details also about the boot ROM and in terms of size, but also in terms of features. There may be multiple boot options. These shall be selectable through links or switches, and again, the document specifies which options should be available. We also describe in the specification the various options for storage. Ideally, an enterprise board shall be able to boot off the network. So out of the boot code, you could then download everything from the network. Anyway, for debug, for testing, for convenience, we can also foresee storage. So we specify a minimum of 4 GB. Or there should be an interface to a USB disk, an SD card, or SATA. Multiple UARTs shall be available. First of all, one debug UART. This shall be available since startup for the console. And the document, the 96-board Enterprise Edition document, goes to the detail of specifying which IC shall be used to provide the UART over USB interface. So there's a TI1 or equivalent, so that we are sure that you can connect it to your laptop directly, and that should be more convenient than what we have seen in the past. The specifications mentions which port to be used for the console. Yes.
But not to the actual USB device exposed to the host side.
No. To my knowledge, it specifies which chip to be used to provide the UART over USB service, and then we should have one or more UARTs on the expansion connector, and this would be traditional UARTs on the I/O pins. We foresee the need of having also 2 USB host ports. We strongly recommend that this shall be USB 3.0. As this is a minimum of 2 USB ports, we strongly recommend that this shall be double stacked Type A or Type C connectors. And additional USB ports should be placed in a specific area of the board where there's the I/O connector and where there's room for more flexibility in the design. The specification also covers power management and especially measurements of the power consumption. We recommend that there shall be 0 ohm resistors on the production board. This would allow users to remove the 0 ohm resistor and add the proper resistors that they would use to measure the current. The specification does provide more details on which subsets of the power domains that could be measured. So I invite you to look at the specification itself. There are other optional sources to be measured. There can be USB power out. It should be possible to measure also the power on PCI card, and also we recommend to support the ARM energy probe. This is very important for us, power button and reset button. This should be available for manual power on-off and manually resetting the board, but we also require that there are pins that allow us to automatically control the power cycle of the board automatically in our test farm in Laba. So I see Tyler and Dave smiling about this. Other details in the spec on the miscellaneous side. If you do require a fan connection on the standard version, so the 160 by 120, then the document specifies which connector should be used for the external fan and which voltage. So it's a standard PC style of fan. Well, of course, on the micro ATX, that the fan would be eventually embedded on the board itself. JTAG is optional. If implemented, then we do recommend using the standard 10-pin JTAG. We suggest having user LEDs. In this case, we recommend having 4 LEDs of a green color, directly programmable from the SoC. On the Ethernet port, well, we recommend the usual green and yellow LEDs that are part of the LAN connectors. The expansion connector is key. The 96-board Enterprise Edition shall support the low-speed expansion connector that is the same as the 96-board Consumer Edition. It's mandatory that the same expansion cards, the mezzanine cards that run and that can be used on the Consumer Edition, shall be used also on the Enterprise Edition. This is extremely important because this is what enables the ecosystem of makers. This expansion connector, low-speed expansion connector, provides all these interfaces, GPIOs, I2C, SPI. This can be used by all sorts of IoT devices. Grant gave a great demo earlier this morning. And so all those very same boards shall be able to run on the Enterprise Edition of the spec. Another important feature is that there shall be GPIOs able to wake up the platform from standby. SATA and PCle are optional. We highly recommend SATA for serious enterprise usage anyway. If PCIe is implemented, as it is optional, but if implemented, it shall provide a connector with a 16 lane. Then it's up to the manufacturer and the SOC vendor to support from 1 to 16 lines, but anyway, it shall be a 16-line connector. And optionally, we can have also the PCIe Mini or the M2. This is a reference positioning of all the components. So you see that the specification goes up to the details of specifying where the connectors, the SODIMM connector, USB net, where all this should be placed. This is important so that also from a build farm or a test farm point of view, we can have multiple different boards in a rack, and you would have all the cables all on the same side, and that facilitates the logistics in setting up the boards. And this is not just a spec. The first board is going to be available very, very soon. It's the Husky board by AMD. So this is a cooperation between AMD, between the companies manufacturing the board, between Linaro. So AMD has seen this cooperation on the specification, the use case, and the actual physical board. So the board is featuring the AMD Opteron processor in its quad-core version. And this is a picture of the board, and this is the real size. Well, this is paper. It doesn't boot up yet, but it's a 1-to-1 size. So it's fully in line with the specification. It's a low-cost 64-bit ARM server software development platform. It's going to be available in the next few months. And do watch the website for all the updates. So it's a quad-core A57 based on the AMD design. It has 2 SODIMM sockets. So it comes with pre-installed memory, but you can upgrade it. 1 eSATA and 3 SATA ports that you see, the blue ones at the top. 1 gigabit Ethernet, the PCIe Gen 3 interface, JTAG, 10-pin and 38-pin, and you see the USB micro port for console. So it's fully in line with the standard edition of the standard version of the specification. There is this ongoing theme that hardware without software is not really doing much. And well, we had that great keynote earlier this morning, and by the CEO of ARM, and our own CEO George has gone through the software reference build platform in the previous session. So here we would like to cover briefly what we are planning for the 96-board Enterprise Edition. Martin, do you want to join or help? And we can share the microphone. Yes, Dave. Yes.
Does the specification mention anything about 10 gig?
1 gig is the minimum. As we have seen earlier this morning, if you want to go over a distributed architecture, distributed processing, then you would need 10 gig. So it's up to the manufacturer. Moving from 1 gig to 10 gig has a premium cost on the PHY mainly. So it's up to the vendors to decide if they want to stay on 1 gigabit or go directly to 10 gigabit or provide an upgrade path. 1 gigabit and then provide an upgrade to 10 gigabit for an additional cost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking for LNG, they'll want to cover.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw the demo where we kind of showed how, can we just turn this one on as well? Okay, so we actually showed where with the dupe, once you go past about 3, you flatline, right? Doesn't matter how many systems you deploy, so the 10 gig is important. You want me to go through this? All right, so if you look at what we're talking about, the difference between the CE version and the Enterprise Edition version, just sort of to walk through this. So bootloader software, both are going to have it. The kernel, both are going to have it. And if you look at the distributions, what we're really keying in on here is Debian and CentOS. And the reason is we want to have 2 operating systems that are freely available to the maker community, to developers, to people who are going to on-ramp very quickly, that they can use, that have that long-term support. So that's really the idea behind the Enterprise Edition, right? You don't want to build something that then 6 months, 9 months, 18 months later is, no longer receives updates. And then on the additional software, we're really focused, we're not doing OPTE, obviously, but we're very focused on OpenJDK. And if you really want to push OpenJDK now, JDK 8, you're going to need more than 1 gig, right? So you're going to want to use an Enterprise Edition board when you start really trying to push the metal for your JDK work.
So the way this works is that we are foreseeing a cooperation between the work done by LEG. I think you have seen this slide earlier this morning and in the previous session. The point here is that the groups are providing their workloads and the output of the engineering effort by each group. They are making it available to all their members as well as the 96-board team. The 96-board team is the team that is reusing all the work by all the segment groups and the core engineering at Linaro, and is packaging, testing, documenting, and supporting it on the 96-board community. So there is no duplication of efforts. By all means, it's the interest of the whole Linaro and 96-board teams to have a full synergy.
Yeah, okay. So you said these are on? This one's on? Okay, so you get to keep that.
Okay.
All right. So for LEG, this is what we're really focused in on, right? Obviously, ACPI, UEFI, what we're starting to loosely call the boot architecture, but you understand where we're going with this, so there's full support for that. KVM, of course, is central to what we're doing, so the virtualization team will be very involved in what we do, and we'll take that work and include it in. And then the target is really, looking at OpenJDK and Hadoop, and then also if you're going to be doing some test workloads around cloud, that's really the focus. Again, Debian and CentOS, does that stop anybody from building upon this for Fedora or for OpenSUSE or for anything else? No, not at all, right? But we expect that to be more of a community effort in a way. Again, also, when we do this, when we build this sort of reference platform, all we're doing is we're bootstrapping a distribution. In other words, it's a very bad term to use, but we're not building our own distribution. You're actually going to be pulling the Debian source, the Debian packages from the distro or from CentOS. So to enable other distributions is going to be trivial to do. I don't want to trivialize that, but it will be trivial to do. Right, and ideally, if you look at it, we've got, areas that we want to really look at with the Enterprise Edition. Then you take advantage of AMD Seattle board, APM Mustang, Cavium, Moonshot, Huawei's D02 boards. We'd really like to be able to do this where we're unifying all the work that we're already doing in LNG and providing it in something that's a little more consumable. Any questions around that, or does that make sense? Silence is agreement. Go ahead.
So, KVM's on there, that's great. Any thoughts on Zen? Is that something that you guys want to get into? Or?
I mean, we've done some work around Zen. I think right now what everyone's asking us more for isn't Zen, although I'm not against Zen at all, but is more how well does Docker work? How well does CoreOS work? How does something like LXD work? So really for us, we're going to be focusing on KVM and on container technologies. But that isn't to say that when members come and say, look, this is really important to us, that we're not going to support that.
Based on what George said earlier, I mean, every component that you need is going to be open source upstream.
Correct. Yeah, we're not in the business of doing anything private or anything like that. Go ahead.
Does that apply to the firmware as well?
Yes? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
EDK2, Linaro is producing.
I mean, we're working on all of it, right? That's what LEG is really trying to do with you know all the members from in the enterprise group. They're all working very hard to be able to provide that, right? So, and we've had really good support. It's been very good. I'd like more. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was looking if Leif is in the room.
No, he's doing a cross distro, but
So we invite you to have a chat with Leif in the LEG hacking room, as Leif is really
correct. Yeah.
over IRC.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Art's right over here too, and you know.
So Leif, at the last UEFI Blackfest, Leif presented a proposal about platform support
That's right.
to complement the EDK2 builds so that we can align all possible boards without duplicating the various trees.
Right. Yeah, we want one sort of tree. Right. Yes.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding the target of the board here, but is there a plan to have a larger form factor board at some point, you know, with the possibility of being able to plug in like a reasonable amount of RAM, even like a server platform?
I mean, I think that's. I will bet that all of the members in LEG have plans to provide servers to do just that.
Yes. So we clearly don't want to enter the 96 board specification is for a low-cost development board. It's not for an end product server. That's a different business, and that there are different companies out there. This is to promote the adoption of ARM 64-bit.
Yeah. And those companies are much better doing high volume production of servers with support and everything else, right? So.
There's no intention at all to compete. And you may have seen from the specification, actually, that here there are some limitations which are not bad design, but they may be there for a good purpose.
Right.
Having a limited number of SODIMM, you were saying, why don't we add more? Well, the idea is that this shall not be a true server. It shall not compete. It shall enable more business for the developers
Right.
and for those who are building real servers. This is not going to compete with real servers, not at all.
Right. It's like the demo I had this morning where I used the high key, which is a fantastic thing, right? So it's a Dragon board, but it's 1 gig of memory. How you know, if you want to really sort of implement something that's really enterprise scaly, you need more capability, and that's what the Enterprise Edition offers for people to do, right? It's really how do we grow the ecosystem for server for ARM? So that's the goal. Yes.
So, you mentioned it. Are you mandating the device support on these things? Like previously,
I mean, yes, I mean, they're going to be UEFI enabled. That's the #1 focus that we'll have on it. You can't block anybody from trying to do anything else, right? That's not the open source way of doing it. But where we're really focused is on enabling UEFI, so you get that really good experience from that. But if someone wanted to go and do U-boot, it's good.
Steve?
Is there any chance we could raise the minimum RAM for the enterprise specification? 1 gig is not even enough to build this enterprise software.
Yeah, so we said that's the minimum just to boot the kernel.
Yeah.
Then we leave the freedom and the flexibility to the manufacturers whether they want to be successful in which use case. awesome. One can put a 1 gig soldered on the board, full stop.
But, like,
But then the
we wouldn't need to
Anybody's going to do that.
Exactly.
You should have that flexibility in the spec, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, we thought a lot about this. Do we mandate 8 GB or 16 GB minimum? And then somebody was saying, well, we may have some limited use where 1 GB would be enough, and somebody may want to produce a board with just 1 GB. Why are we mandating 16 GB? And we're raising the bar too high also on the base cost point of view.
I mean, there are reasons for only having a gig, right? Or maybe 2 gig. If this board is for something like a train, set-top box. I was trying not to use set-top box, by the way.
So let's move on, as we have a lot of input from Mark on the set-top box. So the board is not only for servers, and we have collected input from the networking group and the home group. So any other question on the leg side, on the server side, or should we move on to the other teams? Okay.
Moving right along.
So feedback from LNG. There was, I think, was it Dave? You were asking. Thank you, Martin.
No problem.
You were asking about networking, right? You were saying 1 gigabit Ethernet only is not enough for networking. So the first feedback is that the networking group. Well, and here you see also the difference in cost. The networking group is looking at development platform. Again, around $300. Their first requirement is that they need from 2 to 4 gigabit Ethernet connectors. And they need access to the hardware accelerators in the SoC. They do see a value in the Enterprise Edition board, as they can reuse the specification as is. The specification mandates a minimum 1 gigabit Ethernet, but you can have more. So the specification is so far seems to be good enough for the networking as well. Please.
Are you compliant to this form factor if you have multiple Ethernet ports?
It depends on how many.
2.
Yes, 2 at least, yes. 2 at least, yes. The specification is open. There should be enough space on the form factor. Yes. Yes. I understand that the LNG group will have a more detailed discussion on 96 board tomorrow, and the 96 board team is eager to receiving more feedback in seeing how we can add more flexibility and have the board, the specification usable also for networking. On the home group, Mark, do you want to help me? Because you have done an amazing analysis. Dave, on time, how much do we have?
We've got about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. So, Mark.
All right, so from the Linaro Digital Home Group, we came to the realization that we would be better off building upon the Enterprise Edition specification rather than the CE specification. That might strike some people as a bit odd, but there were certain things in the CE spec that were very specific to mobile. There was the addition of the high-speed expansion connector that is typically not found on a set-top design. So when we went through our wish list of all the components that we would like to have, essentially what we found was that the Enterprise Edition spec was the least restrictive and actually gave us more flexibility with respect to some board real estate. So with our members, I initially wrote a proposal, and then I've had, within Linaro people look at it, and then I've had my steering committee people look at it. And these are the kinds of things that we want. Really, we have questions is really, the features we want and what will be mandatory and what will be optional. So for us, a 1 to 2 gigabyte memory limit or memory requirement is really what we need. We're not doing large servers. We're not looking to put 3 SATA ports on the board. We could have an eSATA perhaps for a disk drive, but as many of you know, the trend in the set-top world is to now deliver more content through the cloud, and you're even seeing DVR boxes, that's all cloud driven now. They're taking the hard drives out of the set tops. So we're looking at a form factor. Typically the boards are a bit smaller, but the 120 by 160, again, this is a development board. It isn't a product. And so we find that it's, there's enough room to put whatever peripherals we want. We have the RAM, again, minimum 1 gig. We're getting recommendations that 2 is probably best. We want to support like Linux build as well as Android. eMMC flash, 8 gig, bootable flash, micro SD, things that are already on the Enterprise Edition spec. And I can go down through the list. HDMI, of course, is something that we need on a set-top. Well, I won't say anything about VGA, nobody wants that, but it was just included. Again, I just included a kind of a laundry list of things and had our members go through saying what they thought was good and not, needed and not needed. HDMI in could be an option for people who are making TV-specific input boards that are receiving the content from a set-top. Again, that's an option. Audio, typically an audio jack as well as a SPDIF port. Again, we have the flexibility on the E-spec to add these things. Ethernet, well, gigabit Ethernet is more than enough for us. 100 megabytes would probably be fine, or megabit would be fine. 802.11 Wi-Fi, typically GN, possibly AC, because what we see in the home now is that with the advent of broadband gateways coming into the home, they will now be, there used to be there's a technology now called MoCA, which is multimedia over coax, that would distribute your content from a home router or a gateway set-top to the satellite remote set-tops in the house. Now everything is going to go Wi-Fi. So the new broadband routers are supporting 802.11 AC, and they're not using the coax within the house anymore, so they're bypassing all that. Bluetooth, USB ports, UART, if it's like an FTTI, again, this is for my committee to decide, but we're essentially taking this list of items and just narrowing it down. Do we want JTAG, PCIe? One of the things that came up was on security for smart card, and even having infrared for the remote control. That's still a staple on a lot of the set-top boxes. So long story, but really what we're doing is taking the Enterprise Edition specification as the foundation, as not being very restrictive, and then we're adding our own set-top required features on top. And hopefully within a week or two, we'll have this list ironed out and we'll be able to write a proper specification that sits on top of that EE foundation.
Questions? Any further question?
I think another one's more. Why you said that one thing will not be included in the first software release?
In the first release, that is mainly targeting servers, correct?
Okay, so we can eventually see a support for backlog.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have access to the secure side on the device? Yeah, in some cases, they decide to not. In some cases, they decide to not open it up, so we really can't use the secure side. Have we any insights in that?
I think that will depend on the SoC that is being used on the board.
Okay. Thanks.
In LHG, we firmly intend to support OpT in our trust zone. It will be on a set-top design for sure.
We will have a demo on this Friday or come back. For the AMD board, do you have a demo in this Friday, maybe, or somewhere in the hacking room?
This one is not booting up yet. There must be a short somewhere. Yeah, you see, I bought it on an e-commerce website, and then I understood why it was so cheap. It's not
I
going
assume,
up.
oh,
John, yes.
I assume the clock frequency of this is 0. Do you have an idea of the clock frequency of the finished board?
That depends on the SoC. So let's go back to the AMD page. It's not here yet. I don't see Suravi. Oh, yes, here's Suravi. 1500 megahertz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you.